All right, here to add some perspective is Dr. Megan Ranney. She's an emergency physician and dean of Yale School of Public Health. All right, so let's dive into this. We're learning that Kate Cox, as we just laid out, has left Texas to get an abortion in another state amid this ongoing legal battle. That wouldn't necessarily be an option for every person in her position, correct?
That's exactly right. And that is one of the many parts of this story that concerns me so much. I mean, first and foremost, there's the fact that a decision that should be between a woman and her doctor has been taken out of her hands. The second thing that deeply concerns me about what's going on is that because of the legal rigmarole, she's had to delay a needed procedure by weeks. And with abortion, getting it earlier is often easier, has less risk. And so every week that passes has put Kate and her future family, as well as her current family, at greater risk. And the third part about this that makes me deeply concerned is that Kate is so lucky to have the resources and the support and the time to be able to travel. That is not true for most women. They don't have the money. They can't get time off work. They may not have childcare to watch their kids at home. And so she is, as much as she is in a truly horrific situation, she's also in a somewhat privileged situation compared to other women in the state of Texas and in other states where abortion is restricted.
Yeah, I mean, she was 20 weeks and, you really do have a tight timeline between that, right? And when the baby could be considered viable outside the womb. And then that even limits your options even more if you want to get an abortion, if your state doesn't allow that. Of course, Texas is one of the most strict on the books. And you have Ken Paxton, who is a lawyer, not a medical doctor, we should emphasize. He is arguing that this woman's situation does not fit the definition of life-threatening of Texas law, and that her future fertility is not impacted anymore from this pregnancy with any other pregnancy. I mean, basically he's saying just because this fetus has a life-threatening condition, that doesn't impact her future fertility more than any other pregnancy, even if it was normal. What do you say to that?
So just as I can't weigh in on the nuances of the law, similarly, it's not a lawyer's place to weigh in on the nuances of medicine. If this woman's doctor is saying that carrying this likely pregnancy to term is threatening her future health, we need to take her doctor's word. Moreover, as an emergency physician, what worries me even more is all of the folks that are coming into emergency departments across the state of Texas and in other states with similar laws who don't have the time to wait, who are literally facing life-threatening conditions. The physicians caring for them are being forced to go through this same legal rigmarole in order to care for the patients in front of them who are facing incredibly time-sensitive, life-threatening conditions. Again, not to say that Kate's case is not time-sensitive. Each week that passes puts her and the rest of her family more at risk. And if I can say one more thing here, it's that I get deeply worried about what would happen to the United States if folks had to travel outside of the US in order to get this life-saving health care, because abortion is part of reproductive health care. Luckily, right now, there are places within the US that Kate can travel to.
There is so much focus on the physical aspect of this and whether it could be life-threatening or not. But what about the emotional distress for this woman? She's obviously decided to travel outside the state, but just going through all of this and being forced by the state to carry a baby with a terminal genetic condition against her will. As a pregnant woman myself, I can just say pregnancy in and of itself is very stressful and hard. And then all of this on top of that, the emotional distress.
Yeah, Pamela, I think that's such a great point. And in fact, there are lots of studies that show that when women are able to access safe and legal abortion, it improves their mental health compared to women who are forced to carry a pregnancy to term against their will. That's even more true in a case like this. I am not a maternal fetal medicine physician, but friends who have had to deliver that news to their patients, that their patient is carrying a fetus that has a severe chromosomal abnormality like trisomy 18. It is one of the most devastating pieces of news that a woman and her family can receive. And to then be told that you don't have the choice about what to do next, knowing that you are carrying a fetus who is unlikely to survive to birth, much less after birth. I mean, that just adds another layer of loss of control, of trauma, and of stress. Never mind for her little kids who are watching their mom be pregnant and how confusing that must be for the rest of her family and the emotional stress that they're under. It is a horrible situation all around.
That's a really important point. Do you worry that this could also endanger the lives of millions of women and their children because doctors could simply choose to leave Texas or refuse to practice there, given the legal limbo that they could be faced with?
That is, as a public health professional, that's one of my biggest worries. Certainly, the single case is upsetting and heartbreaking, but we already face one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the developed world here in the United States. We already have millions of women nationwide who are living with limited access to high quality obstetric care. That's part of the reason that we have such high maternal mortality rates. And we have studies showing already that these states that pass restrictive abortion laws are less likely to attract new OB-GYNs. So new physicians are less likely to pursue their training in these states. So it's worsening that existing problem of lack of access to physicians. It is then going to continue to worsen maternal mortality rates, access to high quality healthcare. It is just a really bad situation from a public health perspective. And of course, it's a situation that's preventable if we just recognize that abortion is part of healthcare.
Dr. Megan Ranney, thank you so much. Boris?